Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm going to be reviewing the newest single/EP from Kevin Abstract, Arizona Baby. I say this is a single/EP because I'm not 100% sure which of those exactly this thing is. I've seen some sources say it's a single, others say it's an EP. Really, it's not super important because regardless, I'm going to be talking about these three songs. I just might change the title of this video or the description accordingly if we get more accurate information in the future in regards to what this thing is, but yeah, my thoughts on this thing, the actual contents of this review, aren't really going to change all that much, regardless of what you would classify this thing as. This is the first of supposedly three single/EP things that we're supposed to be getting from Kevin in the upcoming weeks. And I was pretty excited when this thing dropped, considering I'm a pretty big Brockhampton fan. I really liked their Saturation trilogy, which was the first Saturation album was when I got on board with Brockhampton initially, and then Iridescence last year was my favorite record of last year. And even when it comes to a lot of the members' individual outputs prior to Brockhampton really blowing up, I would consider myself a pretty big fan of a good amount of it, especially when it comes to some of Kevin Abstract's solo material prior to the Saturation trilogy, particularly his 2016 album American Boyfriend, which overall I thought was a pretty good album, a kind of underrated gem from that year, I feel. So I was pretty excited to hear what he was going to be doing on this collection of tracks here, considering it's been a long while since we've gotten any solo output from him by himself outside of Brockhampton. And I'd have to say that this is definitely an interesting change of pace for him overall. I like the fact that on these three tracks he brings a somewhat different sound and style than anything that he was doing, prior to Brockhampton blowing up on his solo material, or even in Brockhampton itself. This isn't like a complete 180, change in sound or anything like that. This is still very much in his wheelhouse when it comes to the sounds he's playing around with. However, I like the fact that these three tracks bring something new to the table. The overall sound of this collection of tracks is one that's pretty summery sounding, a bit upbeat as well, especially when it comes to the instrumentals. I wouldn't necessarily say the same thing about the lyrics on this thing, but more on that later on. I also like how in a lot of the instrumentals here on this collection of tracks, there's a bit of a jazz influence, which is something that I don't really feel like Brockhampton or any of Kevin's solo material prior have really experimented with before. It's just a little nice influence on this thing that, like I said, makes it a little bit of a change of pace from what Brockhampton had been doing before, gives this collection of tracks a distinct sound to some extent, but at the same time keeps it very much in their wheelhouse, if you will. And overall, what you end up getting here on this thing, at least when it comes to the instrumentals, is some pretty summery sounding, somewhat jazzy, and at the same time kind of nostalgic sounding instrumentals that I think pair up really nicely with a lot of Kevin's lyrics and deliveries here on this thing. The opening track on the project, Big Wheels, is a rather short cut, and overall the beat on this one is probably the least summery sounding out of all of these. It's a bit more just chaotic sounding to some extent, a bit more wild, a bit more all over the place, and it matches up very nicely with a lot of Kevin's lyrics and delivery on this track, considering his flow here on this song is very frantic. He's talking about, on this track, a variety of different problems that he's dealing with currently in life, and this kind of leads me to my next big point about this project and then some of the lyrics on this thing that I happen to enjoy, and that a lot of the lyrics on this project, or this collection of tracks rather, sees Kevin kind of reflecting on his own success, his own fame within Brockhampton, and how this has kind of affected him both positively and negatively to some extent. This also was a big reason why I liked Iridescence as much as it was, because that album also saw Brockhampton, all the members in the group that is, kind of reflecting on their own popularity and their come up the year prior. It was something I really enjoyed seeing, and I like this continuation of that theme here in this collection of tracks as well, especially because Kevin brings some newer topics to the table to talk about as well. One of the more interesting tidbits of information that Kevin brings up in this opening track to the collection of songs here is how he feels oftentimes how he's kind of being accused of using his own sexuality to kind of gain more fame, which obviously is something that would bother him very much, especially when you consider the fact that a lot of gay artists like Kevin Abstract haven't really been able to express these points of view in their music until, fairly recently, especially within hip-hop. An idea that was kind of reoccurring throughout these collection of songs was the idea of college, and Kevin kind of reflecting on not going into college, kind of thinking about maybe what his life would have been like maybe had he gone to college instead of, doing Brockhampton instead. It's a kind of interesting bit of information. I feel like a lot of times on the songs on this project, Kevin's kind of reflecting on his fame, kind of wondering like, to himself what things would have been like had he been living a more normal life instead of being a musician in Brockhampton. However, at the same time, he's not just kind of reflecting on this in potentially a positive way, thinking about how his life could potentially be better. He also kind of used the negatives to this as well, because if, for example, on the third track on this collection of songs, he talks about how back in high school, for example, he contemplates how if people in his school knew he was gay, what would have happened to him? Would he have been beaten up and things of that sort? So at the same time, he's kind of struggling with his fame and his success here on these collection of tracks, talking about his success, the positives of it, the negatives of it, kind of considering what his life would have been like if he was living a more normal life, and the positives and negatives of that, if you will. And it makes for some very interesting lyrical substance here on this collection of songs. Even though this thing might just be a collection of, tracks and not like an official EP or an album or anything like that, I still feel like there's a lot of consistency to the lyrics here across these three songs that makes them a very enjoyable listen from start to finish. And I'm wondering if the other collections of songs and material that we're going to be getting from Kevin in the upcoming weeks are also going to be thematically tied together, or might thematically tie into this collection of songs. Overall, the lyrics on these three tracks I think are really good. And Kevin's performances across this collection of songs is also pretty great overall, and a bit different as well from anything that he had done on any of his solo material in the past. Some of the stuff he does here is somewhat similar to what he's done in Brockhampton when it comes to a lot of the vocal manipulations put on his voice, the balance between the singing and the rapping and things of that sort. But it is still pretty interesting seeing him tackle these sounds and styles just by himself. It's kind of interesting and different as a result of that. Like I said, the opening track to this thing features a really great flow from Kevin. It's very cold sounding, very aggressive as well, just very to the point. Overall, a really ear-grabbing opening track. The second track to this thing features some faster flows. Overall, it has a bit of an upbeat feel to it, even if the lyrics don't necessarily reflect that. It also features some nicely used vocal manipulations, some nice singing from Kevin as well. And then the third track on this thing features some slower flows overall, just an overall slower vibe to it. Some, once again, nicely done vocal manipulations, especially on the hook of this third song. It's the performances across this collection of songs are pretty great overall as well. I feel that this collection of songs here really showcases a nice example of where Kevin is at this point in his career. He's doing a lot of these same stylistic things, at least when it comes to his own delivery, his rapping, his flow, his singing, the manipulations upon his voice, as he was doing in Brockhampton. However, he's applying it to songs where he's essentially just by himself and over some production that, while it's not too far off from some of the stuff that he's been on before, it is different enough from the stuff that he's been on in the past to make this collection of songs have a distinct sound to it compared to anything previously released in his discography. And like I said before, this collection of tracks also features some really engaging and interesting lyrics as well. Overall, I think this is a pretty great collection of tracks. Like I said, I'm not sure if this is an EP or just a single, but regardless, I really enjoyed this thing from start to finish, and I feel like even if these are just three tracks that maybe aren't supposed to necessarily be put together, I feel like listening to this thing from start to finish is a really rewarding experience, even if it is a shorter one than Brockhampton fans are maybe used to. Overall, I would definitely have to recommend this to fans of Brockhampton, Kevin Abstract's material, even just fans of, the more alternative hip-hop and R&B, that kind of lane of music. If you like that kind of stuff and you've yet to check out Brockhampton, their material, and some of Kevin Abstract's material, I'm not sure I would say this is necessarily the best place to start or the most essential place to start, but it's a fairly decent place to start. There's a lot to enjoy here on this thing. Overall, yeah, I would definitely recommend this collection of songs to anyone watching. And with that said, that concludes this review here today. If you happen to agree or disagree with my opinion or anything like that, feel free to leave your own thoughts on this project in the comment section down below. While you're down there, make sure you leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music related content, things like album reviews, track reviews, things of that sort. If you like that kind of content, make sure you subscribe. Thank you for watching once again, and stay golden.